Welcome to the Sage Planning Solutions Podcast. Join Brad Marshall, Patrick Bennett, and Dominic Ruiz as we help you navigate life's financial obstacles and find financial freedom.
Securities and advisory services offered through Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. Catteray Grant and Sage Planning Solutions are separate and unaffiliated entities. The information provided here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or personalized investment advice. Any opinions or forecasts contained herein reflect the subjective judgments and assumptions of the authors only and do not necessarily reflect the views of Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated. Investing is subject to risks including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax, legal, or investment planning advice. Neither Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated nor its registered representatives or employees provide tax or legal services. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice.
Welcome to the Sage Planning Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Ruiz, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Patrick Bennett and Brad Marshall. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Chief Executive Officer of GetDynasty, Mr. Alessandro Chesser. Alessandro, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with some of your experience. You're at Carta for 7.5 years. For those not familiar with Carta, they are an equity management software company, and they help manage cap tables, compensation, and valuation. You were the first salesperson at Carta, and you helped scale up the private market business unit. Is that true?
Yeah, I helped scale the entire sales organization for Carta. I started as the first sales rep, and when the company has $0 in annual recurring revenue, I started selling contracts. By like my third or fourth month, I think I brought in $200,000 in a new ARR that month. And then I went to the CEO, Henry, and I said, Henry, we can scale. We should hire 100 people. And I remember at the time, I was looking at another startup company called Zenefits. There was just this TechCrunch article about them saying they just hired 100 people, 100 salespeople. They're growing super fast. I'm like, Henry, we should do it. We can do the same thing. So we didn't hire 100 people right away. We hired slow, but it was like, Henry's like, okay, start with 8. And over the next 3 or 4 years, I built a team that was 200 people reporting to me. And during that time, we launched a lot of products. And by the time I left Carta, the company was well over $300 million in ARR.
And a couple of years ago, you and your partners decided to start GetDynasty, which is a digital trust platform. Let's start off by allowing us to ask you just a couple of questions. Number one, what inspired you and your team to create GetDynasty? And number two, why do people need this?
So what inspired us to start this company? I didn't really go into my background prior to Carta, but I actually started out in financial services. My very first job, 16 years old, I started working at Bank of America, actually with you, Dominic. I think I spent about 8 years working for the retail banks. I worked for B of A, Wells Fargo, Washington Mutual. When Washington Mutual went out of business, I was definitely there selling loans at the time. And so I had a lot of exposure to trust already. I had a very good foundation. I knew why everybody in the financial world, like you guys know, everybody should have a trust. Like it's one of the things that we always tell our customers. And my mom also has been, heavily embedded into the financial services industry, also in like private bank, wealth management type stuff. And I always remember, whenever she would meet with a really wealthy client, the first thing she asked is like, how's your trust set up? Like always, it was always the first question. And so I knew it was important. But during my time at Carta, when I was running sales, I can't actually take credit for this idea. It was a very smart individual who was on our strategy team. And at this point, Carta already had was up to a couple thousand employees. So we got super bloated and we had a strategy team, a bunch of smart Stanford MBAs coming up with new ideas for the company, basically. And so one of them, a very, very smart individual, went to Stanford, and he put together a study, like a memo on why Carta should create a digital trust product. And he presented it to me because I was in charge of sales at the time. And right when I read it, I still have access to that document. Right when I read it, it was just like an aha moment because I knew why trusts are important. I know how hard it is to create a trust and how much friction there is even today. Because I at that point, I had already done decently well for myself. I was able to take money out of Carta. We had a few different liquidity transactions, and I got married, and I got a couple kids now. And so I'm like, I'm the perfect candidate for a trust, and I don't have one. Why don't I have one? And my cousin's an estate planning attorney. And so, he didn't even create a trust for himself. The fact that this entire industry is stuck on paper, to me, was a light went off in my head, because that's what we did at Carta, by the way. All Carta did was take paper legal documents and digitize them. And so, it was paper stock certificates for private companies, and paper option grants and exercise agreements. And so if you think about the stock market, your world, everything is digital, right? Well, in the 1980s, it wasn't, it was paper. And then there was this movement to the online brokerages and transfer agents, and everything became digital. And so there were no more paper stock certificates in the public markets. But the private markets was super far behind. And so it was still on paper. It was still paper. And that's what we did at Carta. We just digitized it, and we created an electronic transfer agent for private companies, and the online brokerage, and the stock exchange. It was kind of the full stack infrastructure for the entire private market. And that was the vision from the beginning. We're going to create a stock market for private companies. Like, we're going to make it all digital. And so when I saw the memo for Dynasty, it was an aha moment for me, because the trust world, the estate planning world, is still stuck on paper. It doesn't matter where you go. You can go to the most expensive attorney in the US, or you can go to LegalZoom, Trust and Will, Rocket Lawyer, name whoever you want. Your end product is a stack of paper that you print out. You have to find a notary, you have to notarize it, and then you store it somewhere. Where are you going to store it? Filing cabinet, you store it in a safe deposit box, and then how are you going to update it? Now you have a stack of paper that you need to update. It's complicated. You can't, number one, who even wants to hold a stack of paper and store it somewhere? It's like, I don't want to look at that. I don't even want to read one page of that thing. It's like, instead our vision was like, let's just make it digital and simple. It's a dashboard. It's not a stack of paper. And then so that's where it came. When I saw that memo, it was the aha moment to me. And I'm like, this needs to be disrupted. And, I already had very good connectivity into the investors that were invested in Carta. I made friends with a bunch of them, and I had my co-founders I'm very close with, and we knew we wanted to start a company. And so this idea came, and it was the only idea that me and my co-founders agreed upon. We all knew that this was a huge opportunity.
So it sounds like you guys are trying to disrupt the estate planning industry. Am I off track there?
No, you're 100% on board, but I would be more specific, because estate planning is broad. There are wills, there are health directives, there are power of attorney. These are all just paper documents. There are contracts that get processed by judges. We are very specific. We are a trust company, because a trust is the only estate planning document that's a legal entity. It's the only legal entity. It's the only thing that you can put your house in. Your trust can own your house. It can own your bank accounts. It can own your investments. It's a legal entity. None of the other estate planning documents are a legal entity. A will is not a legal entity. A health direct, none of that. And so we are very specific on trust, because we want to be an entity management platform. And the trust, we believe, is the most powerful instrument anyways. It's what you put your assets into. And it needs to change over time. You need to be able to add assets. You need to be able, when you have kids, you need to be able to change your beneficiaries. When you move from California to Nevada, you need to be able to change your trust. When you get married, you need to change it. When you get divorced, you need to change it. And so it needs to evolve with you through your life. And so we felt that was the most important one that needs to become software. And it should be as easy to update your trust as it is to update your social media profile. That was kind of our vision.
I like that, because we have clients that I've met, or prospective clients that I've met, where they have a trust, but it hasn't been updated and it needs amendments, but they don't want to pay thousands of dollars, because each amendment is pricey, and they don't want to update their brokerage accounts. They don't want bank accounts and investment properties. That prevents them from going back to an attorney. And a lot of the time, they don't even have their original trust documents, or they'll come in with this binder the size of the Empire State Building.
Alessandro, I want to hear from you in a minute about why people need this, because people procrastinate. And when we tell our horror stories, we'll tell, my own father's a good example. But when you change states, anytime you update, it's messy. And they have to make sure the amendment is with the original stack of documents. Then they have to make sure the amendment is on file with every single entity, bank, brokerage firm, financial advisor, accountant, etc. Because if something happens to them, their successor comes in with the old document, and the amendments don't help. So that's huge.
Yeah. There's also this problem of version control, and this is a huge issue. If you look up, there's so many famous people that died that had issues with this. Bob Marley's one. I think recently there was like Priscilla Presley, and Aretha Franklin was another one. And it's like what happens is these people die, and then they can't find the correct the most up-to-date version. Nobody knows what it is. They find one, and then the other family members are like, no, there's a newer version, and nobody can find the newer version. And you don't know which one's the newer version, right? And so those always end up in probate court. And we haven't even touched on probate court yet, but probate court is the biggest tax on non-wealthy Americans that exists. Like if you don't have a trust, you're going to go through probate court. And there's specific thresholds for each state, but there's some states, they're very low usually. Like in California, I think it's like $100,000. If anything over $100,000 is going to go through probate court, and it's going to cost you 6 to 10% of your entire estate, and maybe even more of that, depending on how long it gets tied up in probate court for. And probate court's on average 18 months, by the way. And the problem with it being paper, like first and foremost, if nobody can find your trust, you don't have one. You don't have one anymore, because that's the source of truth, that stack of paper.
That's a great point.
And so, there's all these, and the same problem happened with the stock market, the paper stock certificates. Like, where is it? Where's my stock? I can't find it. It burnt down in a fire. Like, my stock is gone. And that's a major, and also when it's on paper, it's so much easier to like forge, make copies of, and make changes to, whatever. And we knew that this thing, it needs to go digital. And making it digital also makes it way more accessible, by the way, because, when we started this company, we the first thing we did was we surveyed a bunch of people, and who all the investors that wanted to invest in us. Every one of them that I talked to, I said, do you have trust? Yes or no? First question. 9 out of 10, no. Even these, even the board members of Carta, that one of them was an attorney, didn't have a trust. I'm like, what's going on here? And so 9 out of 10, no, don't have trust. The ones that do have a trust, my very next question, is it up to date? I feel like it was 100%. Everybody said, no, it's not up to date.
That's why I said what I said earlier. The other thing I noticed is that when folks can't find their trust because they moved or they just displaced it, when they go back to their attorney, the attorney never kept a copy.
Yeah, the attorneys don't like to keep copies of it, depending on what state you're in.
Now, how does that impact someone? For example, let's say they passed away, they got the trust with a digital platform like yours. How can something like that hold up in probate?
First of all, in order to get to probate, it's got to be challenged. If it doesn't get challenged, it doesn't see the light of day. It just processes. It processes behind the scenes. It doesn't touch the court system. So it has to get challenged to go through probate, which means one of your family members or somebody's going to be like, oh, I should have got more. Then it gets challenged. If it goes to probate, the process there is just to look for as much evidence for your intentions. And we actually, we worked with the most expensive law firm in the world to figure out how to do this correctly. It was the same law firm that we used at Carta to digitize stock certificates. And we actually found precedents. There's a ton of cases where people died and they never even signed their trust. But they had intention to sign it, and they were able to prove that. And because there was intention to sign it, the trust actually held up. So they just look for like evidence, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we are. We're an evidence building platform. We help you, we go through all types of identification and self-verification and digital signature. We do remote notary as well. You plug you in with remote notary. We build more evidence than anything that exists today.
One of the things that sort of strikes me is that we're in the financial industry, and let's just say that we're in the service industry. Let's be real honest with that. And when we talk to people about trusts, the level of confusion, it's talk about the fog of confusion. I mean, no one really knows, because everyone gets real amped up to do it, and they learn and they do the 3 monotonous meetings with the trust attorney. No one wants to go. It's expensive. And it's basically one of these processes that just punishes the client for getting involved in it in the first place, because it's expensive, it's boring, it takes all day. And so once it's done, they get some weird envelopes and boxes, throw it over the shoulder to go, okay, we're done. And here we are, and we still have clients that have lots of problems with it. If the estate's big enough, you know who comes out of the woodwork, right? Number one. Number two, no one really is that proficient at handling it. They think they can, but at the end of the day, they can't. And who do you really want to be the person in that family that's going to take over trustee duties? So there's a lot of things out there that no one wants to deal with. They're kind of like the third rail. It's just an absolute mess. How do you guys clean up a lot of this and make the distribution of a trust or the continuance of a trust something that Mr. and Mrs. Main Street can do without dedicating a portion of their life to it?
We have a very robust trust product at this point, but we recently started working with partners, mortgage companies, title companies. And what we've done with them is we've actually created an express trust workflow, a very simple 3-step process. That's it, for a very simple trust, like a starter trust, where all you have to do is you have to name the trust, you pick a name for it, whatever you want to call it. You tell us who the trustees are and successor trustee, and then you tell us who the beneficiaries are. And that's it. That's the entire product. And it gives you a very simple, and it's like if you have 3 beneficiaries, it's the express trust, we just divide it up. Everybody gets a third of the estate. Very simple. And then we give you the ability to add all kinds of customization and whatnot. But if people just do that, they avoid probate. If they just do that and and next time they buy a home, they say, put it in the name of my trust. Here's my trust name. They avoid probate. Probate's done. It's gone. That's it. And so, we've made this super simple tool to create a basic trust. And you can add, because the things that don't change in your trust, 2 things. The trustees aren't going to change. If it's you and your wife, they're going to stay that way unless you get divorced and you have to basically create a new trust and dissolve the old trust. But if the trustees generally stay the same, and the name of the trust will never change. Everything else can be easily changed on our platform. You want to change the beneficiaries? Do it. You want to change the successor? Do it. You want to add assets? You want to change distribution? Do it. You can do all that. And we're actually becoming a licensed trust company so that you can also use us as a successor trustee. Because you mentioned that the distribution is a complicated part. Who do you pick? We're doing this because our customers were demanding it. They were saying, hey, I don't have anybody I can trust. Can I just pick you to administer my estate? And so we're becoming a licensed trust company for that specific purpose.
That was very popular when we were at the banks. They offered those services, but it was actually quite expensive.
It cost a ton of money. Everybody loved the idea of having a corporate trustee until I said, yeah, but here's the bill. And then everybody got turned off. And Dom, you and I can think of 2 or 3 people offhand whose estates got wiped out because the trustees didn't know what they were doing. And they got wiped out by lawsuits, and it became just one of the worst experiences that you could have put these people through. A corporate trustee, I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, democratizing it, making it much cheaper, automating it, right? Because the banks are just doing it manually, right? But using software, using AI, right? Create like the same thing that we do in Silicon Valley. We make things easier and cheaper by using software to automate.
The question I have is that when the heirs, let's just call them the inheritors, they have expectations. And sometimes we'll be managing the money for grandma and grandpa and their sons and daughters. They do have certain expectations that, how are we going to get the money? Some will sort of say, hey, I don't care. I want them to spend it all. And that's true most of the time. And then others will just say, hey, how do we get this handled? A lot of times the children of our clients become clients of ours. And we want to be able to have a cohesive conversation with them. And again, trusts were maybe made in the mid 80s and they haven't been changed, and it's been 50 years later. Everyone's living a long time. And so going in and changing things is very, very tough now. Sons and daughters-in-law go away. Once sweet relationships have now soured, is there something where we could take what a family already has established and it's been enacted years and years ago, filed with the court, and take it into your technology platform and basically use it to update and get everything up to date?
First of all, it never gets filed with the court, unless it goes into probate court. Trusts are private. The name of the trust gets filed with the county recorder for your property, but the name doesn't change. So you could go and update your trust on our website, and you don't have to change anything unless your trustees change, which they're not going to change, and the successor, unless you're changing the successor trustee, because the bank does want to know that. That's on the certificate of trust. But all the other things, you can change the beneficiaries, you can cut out the son-in-law, and you never have to change anything. We have customers that come to us and want to digitize their trust, and we have a process to help them do that. The one caveat is, when you go through a lawyer, they're going to give you, it's like going to In-N-Out Burger and getting the number 3 supersized with extra fries and sauce. So they're going to give you a lot of room for customization, because number one, it adds value for them, right? And the more that they can get you talking and wanting specific details here and there, the more they can charge. And so with these trusts that have all these complexities, in order to create an online trust creator, we had to make it pretty standardized. So usually we can help people get 90% of what they already have on paper, but not 100%. And every single customer that has approached us, and I tell them that, they don't even care. They're like, yeah, let me just convert it to yours. I'll make the selections. I don't care if I did this or that before. They don't care, all this extra stuff. For the most part, when we're talking about simple revocable trusts, it's mainly just about who are your beneficiaries, who gets what, when do you want them to get it. We can create milestones. They turn 25, they get X amount, they get turn 30, they get another amount. So we can do all that. But the further the one-off details, the edge cases, or what we call them, we don't support.
There's a lot of sort of misinformation that people may have. Oh, you have to put your money in the trust because it'll save you from a ton of income taxes and a ton of estate taxes. And you just don't want to kind of give your opinion, but based on what we know versus what most people know, what can a trust do or not do for you? Why should people have them these days?
So there are two different kinds of trusts. There's revocable and irrevocable. And this was your question, Dominic. We never got to it, but why do people need this? So revocable trust, you can revoke it, you can change it, it's flexible. Everybody should have a revocable trust. It should be the first thing you do when you buy a home or open a bank account. Everything that you own should be in a revocable trust, because there's no downside, there's no reason not to. It does not impact your taxes in any way. It doesn't help you with the taxes. But what it does give you is it gives you privacy. Because you can call the trust whatever you want. I call it XYZ Trust. And XYZ Trust now owns my home. So if somebody slips and falls on my home, they on my front, my sidewalk, and they look it up online to see who owns the property, they're going to see XYZ Trust. And it's a deterrent from them trying to sue me, because they don't know that I own the property. And so privacy is a big part of creating a trust. The second reason for a revocable trust is probate. Protection from probate court. And so unless you have a trust, if you die or if you become incapacitated, if you have a home, that's going to go through probate court. I think we talked about that earlier. Probate court is the biggest tax on non-rich Americans that exists. Every single year, hundreds of billions of dollars get seized by state governments and forced into probate court. And that money, hundreds of billions of dollars every single year, is not coming from the rich families. Rich families, they have their trusts, are taken care of. It's the non-rich Americans that have to deal with the probate court. So that's the main reason why you want a revocable trust. And then also control, just being able to put everything under one entity and control what happens with it. Those are the reasons to have a revocable trust. Now, what you were starting to talk about there, taxes, that's what irrevocable trust can do. You can get assets out of your name, which can save you death tax. When you die, anything over, I think you guys know better than me, probably 12.9 million right now or something like that. Everything over that is, if you die, is subject to 40% death tax. And so if you gift assets out of your name into an irrevocable trust, you can eliminate that death tax. You have to be very smart with how you do it, and you have to do it well in advance. And so that's death tax. Second is state taxes, income. If you put all your assets in a Nevada irrevocable trust or a South Dakota irrevocable trust, it will actually be subject to Nevada or South Dakota state income taxes. So you can, if you're in California, this is what the richest people do. One of my investors is worth billions of dollars, and he lives in California. None of his assets are in California. Everything he owns is in Nevada. And so he pays no California income taxes on any of the assets that are in that trust. And those are the things that you can do with the irrevocable trust product. And we actually have a product for that as well. It's not our main product is revocable. It's the mass market. Everybody needs a revocable trust. The irrevocable trust, I think that's one that needs to really be democratized because, the richest people in the U.S. are avoiding death taxes and state income taxes. And, whether that's right or wrong, if they can do it, everybody should be able to do it. That's how we look at it.
It's awesome.
And
Thank you so much.
The other reason to have an irrevocable trust besides taxes is asset protection. So when you create an irrevocable trust, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm gifting assets to this trust for the benefit of maybe my children. I'm creating a trust for my children. But because I don't own that irrevocable trust anymore. I'm giving my house to it, my investments, whatever. I'm giving it to the trust. Because I don't own those assets anymore, I now have a layer of separation between me and the assets. So if I get sued or I go bankrupt because I have a business, the assets are separate. The assets are protected for my children because I don't own them anymore. That's the other big reason to create an irrevocable trust.
We see that a lot with blended families. If somebody passes away, if there's a second marriage and they want the assets to go to their kids, but they want the assets to take care of their spouse while they're alive, and they don't want that spouse to spend it, marry a hot bartender and buy him a house in Bermudas.
Sounds like personal experience. Go ahead.
We've all seen that, right? We've seen the new spouse take the money and then the kids get nothing. We all have horror stories. I could share, we've seen it 100 times. So the irrevocable, so when someone passes, it can go into the irrevocable trust, take care of someone, their spouse, while they're alive. And then when that person passes, it actually goes back to their children, as opposed to just going to said spouse and that spouse mismanages it, or I jokingly said spends it, but there's mismanagement that happens all the time. So that irrevocable trust, we see that a lot with blended families.
The divorce thing is a big one also because we get a lot of people who live in community property states and they don't want to do a prenup because prenups are friction. You're getting married and you're going to go talk about your divorce. It definitely doesn't set the right stage for your relationship. And it's expensive. Your spouse has to get an attorney. You have to get an attorney. You're pre-negotiating your divorce. And the biggest reason why prenups suck is because they actually don't always hold up. Because you can get divorced and a judge will actually look at the prenup and say, this isn't fair. Things have changed. Divide the assets. That happens all the time. Like you did all that for nothing. And so what people do instead is they put their assets in an irrevocable, and it's very common for second marriages because they already have their kids. So they put everything they own into an irrevocable trust for their children, sometimes even after they've already gotten married or before, it doesn't matter. But like you give the assets away, you don't own them anymore. So if you get divorced a second time, it's not your kids are guaranteed to get those assets. It's not gonna, they have to take those assets away from your kids now because you don't own them anymore. And so that's a very popular reason to do an irrevocable trust is basically to replace a prenup because it's better than a prenup.
So if we have to break it down for the listeners, because I'm sure there's so many questions that folks have in regards to what's really the difference between going to see an attorney in person and using a digital platform like GetDynasty.
Yeah, you're going to pay thousands of dollars with an attorney every time you need to update it. And you made a very good point. Like the older you get, your family gets bigger, your children get married, they get 50% are going to get divorced. Like you're going to have to change it regularly. You have kids, you move. There's lots of reasons to change it. And so every time you do that, I had a friend of mine who had a revocable trust, a simple revocable trust. He got married. He called his lawyer to update it. They charged him $2,000 just to add his wife. I mean, the more complicated they make your documents, the more you have to go back to them to change it.
How complicated could those documents be? Because if it's just a basic revocable trust,
it shouldn't be complicated, but they make it 50 pages and they make it really confusing. and they add all types of set A/B trust and bypass trust. They do all kinds of things because the more that they can confuse their customers, the more it looks like they're doing rocket science. But what they're really doing, and like I said, my cousin's an estate planning attorney, so I don't want to speak bad about it. But what they're really doing is they just have a template and they're filling the blank. And so the online platforms are replacing that, the lawyer filling in the blank with you filling in the blank with the software. And so you can get, the lawyer can give you more customization because they can actually go in there and they can change stuff. And so I think for people that want a really custom experience and don't mind paying thousands of dollars and don't mind a stack of paper and don't mind paying thousands more when they need to update it, lawyer's a better option. Some people just want to talk to somebody. They want to feel better about it. But for people that just want to make sure that their children get their assets when they die, that's it. You don't need to do anything. You just go to the online company. The most important part is make sure you actually put your assets in the trust. That's the most important part.
There's a funny little story that we used to hear in financial planning years ago. And it was when you're getting onto a plane and you say, listen, I could pay $500 to get from here to New York, or I could pay $80 to get from here to New York. Which one do you want? Obviously, we're going to say 80s, but here's the difference. The $500 flight has pilots. The $80 flight, there's no pilots, but it's run by avionics, by computers and programs. And would you do it? And there's a very small amount of people who would actually say, yeah, I'll take the unmanned, the unpiloted flight. Whereas everybody else is going to say, you know what? I just need to know that there's somebody there in case something goes wrong. So with that as a backdrop, how can people interact with your company and not have to solely rely on clicking boxes, but be able to bounce something off a live human being?
We have a free product, like I mentioned, and that's here's the thing. So many people are like, oh, I'd rather see an attorney, but then they don't. For 10, 20 years, they don't do anything.
Yep.
You guys sent me a client, actually, that had this exact use case. The guy was worth, I don't know, $100 million. And I asked him, why didn't you see an attorney? He goes, my advisor has been telling me to see an attorney for years. He goes, I don't like attorneys. And I just never, he's like, they keep giving me names of attorneys to contact. I just never did it. He's like, so last time they told me, if you're not going to do that, bare minimum, go here to GetDynasty. He said he did it right on the spot. He's like, so, I think there's this issue of like, if people think that they want to go see an attorney, but then they don't. And so they do nothing. And my argument to them is just go and create a free trust on GetDynasty. It'll take you less than 5 minutes. You can do it from your cell phone while you're in the backseat of an Uber. And if you want to see an attorney 6 months from now to update your trust that you already have now and make it all, number 3, supersized, whatever, just go do it. But at least you have it now. And so you can immediately have it own your home. You can have it own your bank accounts. Whatever you buy next can go straight in the trust, right? Because that's not the name of the trust is not going to change. You're going to keep that same name forever. So the attorney can add to it if you want, if you really care about them. But like in the meantime, you're protected. Your family is protected.
So how do you get over the hurdle where a lot of people that haven't been through the adoption of technology, especially when it comes to estate planning, because we've been so programmed, you got to see an attorney. How do you address the concerns to folks that ask, well, how do I know it's real? How can I trust the fact that this software is going to protect me? Because again, we're so used to dealing with the state attorneys to create these, to go to court to protect the investors. How do you address that concern?
Well, first of all, people don't usually have a burning need to do any of this stuff. That's the truth. Like you said, it's like going to the dentist. Like nobody wants to do it. And so if you're not going to go today, then today at least go to GetDynasty because, I can tell you it's going to give you protection, this and that. You're never going to be worse off than you are right now where you have nothing, ever. Never. And so we have, I can tell you all about our process. And like, that's the truth. It's like, we're buttoned up. We've raised millions of dollars. We have top investors. One of our investors is Bill Ackman. He's like a pretty famous hedge fund manager worth billions of dollars. We have like lots of billionaire investors. And we have lots of history with other successful startups. And so we have a lot of reasons why you should trust us. But like, even if right now you have nothing. So unless you're going to go see an attorney today, you should have something because today you have the worst possible scenario, which is nothing. And our free product, it's a no-brainer.
One of the things that comes to mind is when somebody says we have a free product is how do you guys make money? How do you stay in existence?
We have an upgraded product. We have 2 upgraded products. So you can create a free basic trust, but when you need to update it, because need to make updates at some point, that's when we're going to charge you $99 for a subscription.
That's
or
it?
if you want, $99 a year.
Wow.
Or if you want to do remote notary services, or if you want to talk to somebody, you said, oh, they want to talk to, if they want to talk to our customer success representative, and we have one, they're going to have to pay. They're going to have to upgrade to talk to customer success. And if they want advanced features, they have to upgrade. So we have like all these different reasons why they would upgrade. I don't like, we're in business to really solve this probate issue and democratize what we believe to be the greatest financial instrument that exists. If we get everybody using our free product, there's so many ways to make money that don't force us to charge thousands of dollars like attorneys do. We're going to be cheaper. We're going to be faster. We're going to be easier no matter what. And we also have the premium product, the irrevocable trust product, where if you're interested in trying to protect your assets from divorce or lawsuits or creditors, or you're interested in reducing taxes, like that's where the direction you go. That's more expensive.
Now, who's actually creating these trusts on the back end? Is it software or is there attorneys? How is it done?
We've automated it. We've created, just like the attorneys have cookie cutter trust document. We basically went to my cousin and said, give me all your trust templates. And we turned them into software. And so they're templates. They may change a sentence here or there sometimes for the customization I told you about, but 95% of them are just coming from this very simple template. Right. And so we have, every state has its own template for revocable trust. For irrevocable trust, we only do one state right now. We do South Dakota.
Why South Dakota?
I think Brad might have mentioned in the beginning, but it's the number 1 state for trust right now. It's the best state for asset protection and taxes and flexibility. Usually irrevocable trusts are permanent. You can't change them. South Dakota law actually says you can go in and you can make changes. You can change the trustee. You can change the beneficiaries. And we just, based on the laws that exist, we thought South Dakota was a good option. We're actually filing to be a trust company in South Dakota, but also Nevada. We may end up going down the Nevada path also, depending on who's going to be easier to work with and better for our customers overall.
I want to circle back. You mentioned something toward the beginning of the episode. Who are your main competitors, and what's the differentiation between GetDynasty and LegalZoom? I think you mentioned Trust and Wills and a couple other ones. Who are they? And again, what value and competitive edge that you have over them?
Yeah, so I think LegalZoom, Trust and Will, Rocket Lawyer, name whoever you want. Like there's hundreds of them. These online trust creators, we call them paper stores. You go in, you slide your credit card, you pay $500, you print out a stack of paper for a simple trust, simple revocable trust. They don't help you fund it. They don't help you, move assets into it. They don't help you move your home into it. That's the most important part. You create a trust does nothing until you move your assets into it. And they also don't do irrevocable trusts, and they don't offer trustee services, right? Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have law firms. Law firms will help you fund it. They'll create your trust. They'll help you customize it. They'll help you fund it. They'll help you move your home into your trust. They'll help you with an irrevocable trust, but only in the state that they work in. So if it's a California attorney, they're going to help you do an irrevocable California trust, but that's not going to be helpful. If you want to protect assets and avoid taxes, you're not going to do that in California. You're going to need to do that in another state, South Dakota or Nevada or Wyoming or Delaware. And so, we're kind of playing in this middle ground where we're not offering any legal advice, but we're templatizing the most, what we believe to be very key parts, which are not just a revocable trust, but also the deed transfer for your home. We offer that as a product. And then also the irrevocable trust, and then also the trustee services, because we're becoming a licensed trust company, so we can be your trustee in South Dakota. That part is very important. And so, if as far as our main competitor, there's no real main competitor. I think we're getting a lot of more of the premium business because we're doing the South Dakota trust. So our average customer that signs up is actually close to $3 million in assets, the average, and we're getting thousands of people per month. So we actually skew more towards the people that are looking for the tax savings and the asset protection. I think it's because of our branding and because we offer that product. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we're competing with law firms in asset protection states, but also trust companies. So not LegalZoom, Trust and Will, Rocket Lawyer. They're mainly that's what our free product does. instead of going and paying one of these companies $500 for a paper trust, you come to Dynasty, get a digital one for free.
So trust and wills, I think you had mentioned before. What do they actually do if they're not creating a trust?
No, they create a paper trust.
Okay.
Print it out, find a notary, store it in a safe deposit box, but it's only revocable, right? And you still have to fund it. You still have to add assets to it yourself. You're not going to get help doing that. And
if they need to make an amendment, it's the normal route, I'm assuming.
You can go back online and make an amendment and print it out again and find another notary again and do it all and store it. So they do make that easier. I think they're in a, they definitely up leveled the market. I mean, really, LegalZoom does the same thing. So all these online companies are the exact same. They might have newer, prettier software, but they do the exact same thing. Where we're coming in is we're really trying to take it up a notch and innovate and automate title transfer for your property and automate the creation of the more sophisticated trusts and help you settle your estate when a family member dies through trustee services, or help you become a South Dakota trustee so that we can actually help you protect assets and reduce taxes.
I want to start having conversations with clients who have asked me about, taxes. And when it comes to assets passing on, what should if I was going to give them a ballpark of here's what you should expect to pay if you go to a lawyer to try to set this up versus here's how I think we should probably investigate using GetDynasty. What should they expect in terms of cost to get this set up?
Yeah, so for an irrevocable trust, we do it for $1,500. But we're not a licensed trust company yet, so we can't be the actual trustee yet. And that's the expensive part. Mm-hmm. That's going to cost, on average $8,000 a year. So, but you can also just have a family member be your trustee for your irrevocable trust, family member or friend. So really, we're not in position to offer any advice on how they should structure these things. We work with financial advisors, and the financial advisors help people think about how to structure, how many irrevocable trusts they need, how much money they should put in it. And then they just come to us to actually create the trust.
Gotcha.
Because we're not a lawyer, we're not an advisor, and most of the advice that comes with how to structure an irrevocable trust is not actually legal advice. Most of it is actually financial advice. How do I avoid taxes is not a legal question. It's working with your advisor and your CPA. It's working with your advisor and your CPA.
There's so much battling of misinformation out there. Like, what can you do and when can you not do? People glean things from movies and TV, and they think that, hey, all you have to do is this, and re-educating or educating just flatly is what we try to do with people. I think to your point, the probate battle. I like how you put that. That's something that people can easily alleviate now with the product that you guys are offering. So yeah, that's actually a magnificent thing. The barrier to entry is pretty low. It's a few minutes of your time just to get started.
That's it. From your phone while you're multitasking. Like, we literally have people that create a free trust while they're driving their car because they go through verification at the end, and we can see that they're in their. I'm like, what are you doing? You're doing it while you're driving? Like, they got their kid in a car seat in the back, and I'm like, we got another guy that was doing it while he was under his car, working on it, like a mechanic.
Oh, geez.
So a lot of people do it while they're working out in the gym. We can see them because we go through and we're like, wow, that's eventually this could be a commercial for our company. It's so easy. You can do it while you're doing something else.
Can we talk a little bit about?
It's basically who do you want your assets to go to when you die? That's it. Who do you want to inherit your assets? That's it. That's all you need to think about.
Let me take it a step further. When it comes to what child you want handling your money, or who it is that you want to trust when it comes to medical power of attorney type questions, are those explored when people are going through this process with you?
We just do trusts. So we're not getting into the power of attorneys or the health directives. Maybe at some point we'll just, right now we have a simple template for a guardianship appointment. And we really it's just lead gen for us. But, we're not that, these documents you don't need a lawyer for. You want a power of attorney? Go Google and type in California power of attorney template. It's just literally one paragraph, super simple. The templates are all there. You don't need, like I said, if you really want to go to an attorney, they're always going to be around and they're always going to be expensive.
Yeah, it's a daunting thing. Who wants to do that though? You know, even when people have a beloved family attorney, I mean, these guys, they get old. They go out of business. Their office is shut down. You can't get a hold of old documents. It's such a hassle.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, my cousin's an estate planning attorney. I'm very close with him, and never created a trust with his own brother. Doesn't have a trust with him.
Oh gosh.
Brad, you are CDFA certified divorce financial analyst. I know you've seen a ton of things when it comes to estate planning issues, trusts. What are some of the things that we can ask Alessandro about complications that you've seen when it comes to divorce?
Yeah, it gets really, really messy without these just let's call them documents in place. And so it goes to the question, because we've got a lot of clients who resist it and procrastinate. And it's a value proposition for us to help clients do this, right? Because nobody at Fidelity or Charles Schwab or these guys who do it themselves are going to sort of dig in to their entire financial plan and their estate plan and say, hey, look, you need to update this. So people procrastinate and they avoid all of the reasons we've already talked about, right? I don't want to go see a lawyer. I don't want to pay thousands of dollars. And by the way, it's gotten so expensive. We have a hard time even recommending attorneys anymore because they charge so much money. Clients come back to us angry with us. Like, this guy charged me $6,000 to write this trust. And they're so basic now, but you need them because without them, and my own father didn't have any money. He ended up, he passed away with less than $200,000 equity in his house. And I'm his only financially literate child. And with, I don't know, $180,000 equity in his house, it still was $30,000 went through, it cost $30,000 to go through probate. One of his estranged children showed up and contested it, had to go to court, spent a bunch of money on attorneys. And she actually said all this stuff about us on the internet, that we had to fight, that the estate had to pay an attorney to just to make her stop. And the whole thing was to leverage me so that I would just pay her. And she didn't know my dad didn't have any money. And then finally we spent probably about $70,000. And I told my dad, I go, Dad, just get a trust. And he goes, no, I don't need that. I don't have any money. And so $70,000 of the equity in his house went to probate and attorneys. So between a dozen reasons, and divorce is a big one. If you've got to have your stuff buttoned up, because when it happens, especially with this irrevocable trust, to protect your assets from your next divorce, which happens, right? We go through it. It ends up in the attorney's hands. So don't avoid it. Don't procrastinate. And with Alessandro's company, it's very inexpensive. It's very simple, and it just has to get done. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, absolutely. Alessandro, some of the things that come to mind when it comes to creating these trusts, can they hold up in probate? Because that's probably on people's minds.
Yeah, the answer is it depends. Not just ours, any trust. Is it going to hold up in probate? Who knows? Because if there's enough, hold up in probate, once it goes to probate, it's being challenged already. And you have to prove that the person was of sound mind when they completed it. They weren't under duress. Like, there's no actual way to prove any of that. You're relying on a witness or notary who may not even be around anymore. And anything can be challenged. Like I said earlier, we are creating more evidence through video recordings, through facial recognition, than anything that exists today that you intended to do what you're doing. And so I can't tell you it's going to hold up. No attorney can guarantee that their trust is going to hold. Nobody can guarantee anything is going to hold up in probate court, because each situation is unique. But when it comes to evidence, you're not going to find any more evidence producing trust than ours.
That's a great point, because the more evidence there is, the less likely it's going to be contested. Because
they can't go against the evidence.
Yeah.
They can't go get, a judge is going to look at the evidence, and they can't just be like, oh, it's very clear this guy wanted all the money to go to his daughter, but I'm going to decide to do something other than that. Even though there's all this evidence here, they can't do that. They have to follow the evidence. They have to.
For example, if it did go to probate, they got to make sure the person was in the right state of mind. Can they do a video recording?
That's what we do. It's a live video recording of them signing their trust.
And are they reading the trust? Like, this is my living trust.
That's something we think we can add on later. We can add on as another upgrade, is we can get on with you live like this, and I can actually ask you why you're making the decisions you're making. There's things that we can do to strengthen it, for sure. But what we already have today is already much more powerful. Like I said, we do facial recognition. We know that you actually are who you are. You have to actually go in and use our software, and you get recorded while you're doing it.
So if they were to go to probate, can the video be used in court?
It has to be. You cannot not use evidence. You can't. The evidence is there. You have to use it.
So is it stored digitally after it's created?
Yeah.
And so I would have a library. In other words, if I create it, I go in, I get married, and I can update it online with you?
Yeah. And you go through another verification process every time you update it.
Love it.
And if you want to make it even more defensible, we tie in our remote notary to get on with a recording with them like this.
That's my next question. You have a robotic arm you had mentioned. I know a lot of folks probably think, what is that? And that's a newer concept for many people, especially when it comes to a trust. What enables you to be able to use that robotic arm to sign as a notary?
The presidents like President Obama use the robotic arm to sign laws from across the world, and you can just look it up. Obama robotic arm. You'll just Google it. You'll see it. Like, these robotic arms are used already by lots of businesses. And for anybody who wants a really buttoned up, they want the wet ink, we'll do it for them. It's part of the upgraded package. The free package, you don't get that. The free package is still creating evidence, but like it's 100% better than nothing. But if you want to be super buttoned up, you go through the remote notary process with us.
Can you use that robotic arm in any of the states?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where because you can produce a paper wet ink trust will work anywhere, of course. Some states allow electronic signature, most don't. And the ones that don't, if you want to be buttoned up, you go through the remote notary process with us.
That's a great question, actually. Are you? Is this available in all 50 states?
Yeah.
So what would prevent somebody from doing something like this? Because we all have clients who know they should do it. They're usually on the younger side, 50 or under. They're here in Silicon Valley, they're working at a startup or getting some kind of RSUs. I think those are the people at most risk. And when you're talking about this whole process, how you started, some of the people that stick out to me are the ones that work for tech companies, because they're highly compensated individuals. And I'm pretty sure they're not covered under a trust.
And that's the issue, is that there's not a lot of urgency. Nobody's expecting to get hit by a car tomorrow. And that's why we've aligned ourselves with distribution channels where when people are making an investment, that's when they can create the trust, so the investment goes straight into the trust. So you have to catch people at the right time. Either they're buying something, or they're having a kid, or they're getting married. Those are the key points in which this becomes a kind of an urgent matter for them. But unless you're doing that, the only thing I can tell you is, why not? If you can do it in less than 5 minutes from your phone right now while you're listening to this podcast, do it. Because you don't expect anything to happen, but if it does, you're going to be in trouble.
I'm writing my trust as we speak.
I created the first one on this platform.
I'm almost done.
I got the South Dakota package. The billionaire package. That's what the South Dakota package is. You get a South Dakota.
I'm going to need that one.
South Dakota Trust and South Dakota LLC. That's the holding company that owns everything that you own.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about South Dakota. That's become, Delaware used to be the big one, but it looks like for some reason, and maybe you can share with us why South Dakota is becoming the spot.
It's because of the laws for asset protection specifically. If you move your assets there and you get divorced, there's cases where a judge in California said, divide the assets in two. And they tried to get them, and South Dakota said, nope, you can't get them. We're protecting the assets. And it's because of the specific laws that are set up that make it better for protecting assets, hiding assets. In fact, they branded it as like mini Switzerland.
Did you just say hiding assets?
Yeah, because
I'm just kidding. I'm not really opening there.
I mean, they call it mini Switzerland. Like, that's what people use Switzerland for, to hide assets. And so South Dakota actually has become a hotbed for foreign investors. We get a lot of them coming in the tour. People from Mexico, people from countries with very high inflation rates. countries that are unstable, and they want to protect and hide assets in the United States, and they want to do it in South Dakota because the laws that are set up for South Dakota.
So how do you implement a trust for someone that's a non-U.S. citizen?
We don't. Depending on how we get our trust company licensed, we may do that, but we're primarily focused on U.S. customers for now. There's a big market there. There's a lot of money that wants to come in from overseas, and so we can do it, but it's more insurance, it's more complexity. You have the AML, the KYC gets worse. Anti-money laundering laws, you want to make sure you're not helping criminals, right? So
irrespective of what we're hearing on the news, from what you're seeing, the United States is still the safe haven.
Inflation rates are lower here than anywhere else. So that's one reason to move their money to the United States, inflation. And you guys are investors. You guys would love it. Trust me. I talked to one guy, he's a sultan, and he wanted to put $80 million into a South Dakota trust. And I asked him, I was like, what do you want to invest in? He's like, just give me a portfolio of ETFs. So we couldn't help him, obviously, but
nice.
There's lots of people that want to do that type of thing.
So in wrapping up, if you could give listeners one or two things to take away, what do you think those would be?
Everybody should create a bare minimum free trust as soon as possible, because here's the problem. The longer you wait, the more a pain in the ass it's going to be. If you wait and then you buy 3 houses, now you're going to have to retitle every house. Versus if you have the free trust now, it doesn't do anything. It's just there. And then you buy your first house, immediately when you close, you say, put it in my trust. You don't have to retitle anything. And so the problem is some people wait forever to do this. And next thing you know, they have a bunch of bank accounts, they have a bunch of property, they have a bunch of startup investments, they have a bunch of brokerage accounts. They have to retitle everything. And most people never do it. And then what happens is then they die. They have a trust that they created, but they put nothing in it. Everything goes to probate. So they wasted all their time and their money with the lawyer.
The other question we get a lot is, does it change my control, my access to the funds?
So if it's a revocable trust, absolutely not. You have full control, full access. If it's irrevocable, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. You're taking it out of your name. You no longer control it. That's how you protect it. And that's how it reduces taxes, because it's not tied to you anymore. That's the difference. One you control, one you don't control.
So I just finished mine as we were talking here. And at the end, it says, who do you want to be the trustee? Do you want your person to do it, or you want GetDynasty to do it? And when it put down the list of all of the things that the trustee is going to be responsible for digging up, the documents, who you have to contact, who you have to run down, the hassle factor is immense. And for $99 a year, that's my subscription cost. And so the barrier to complexity just gets almost wiped out. It's amazing.
Trying to make things easier and cheaper for people.
Hey, talk about a gift that you can give your kids or your heirs. Hey, congratulations. You're going to get stuff at some point, I guess. I don't know. It's very confusing. I'm dead. I'm up in heaven looking down at you, and you're calling the Social Security Administration, and you're calling the DMV, and you're trying to obtain death certificates, and you're trying to, good luck. This is, that's the nightmare portion of the program. We talk to people all the time who have to deal with this stuff. That for nothing else. That is worth it in spades.
My dad had almost nothing, and it took 7 months, and lawyers and probate. It was a disaster. And by the way, that took over my life. None of that would have happened if he would have just had a trust, because there would have been enough evidence for said person to know that it couldn't be disputed. So it's a no-brainer. And we tell people this all the time, but sometimes people think we're selling them something. It's like what's your angle here?
Well, I think they assume that you're going to get some type of kickback fee, but that's the best part about a product like ours, the free. Just push the free. Don't even tell them about the paid doesn't matter. Just do the free. Then there's no commissions going anywhere. They know all you're doing is adding value, nothing else.
They have control. They can do it at their own pace. I think that it's less intrusive doing it themselves online versus setting up the appointment, driving to the attorney's office, emotionally preparing themselves for an extremely tough conversation. So in wrapping up, thank you, Alessandro, for joining us. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Sage Planning Solutions podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you want more information, visit our website at sageplanningsolutions.com.